Welcome everyone to the St. Joe's History videos. Today we welcome Joanne Kellerman and Michael McBane, and they're going to share their memories of St. Joe's with us. Now, the opening question. When did you start coming to St. Joe's? And how did that come about?
Well, as a couple, we started coming in the middle 1980s. We were shopping for a church, and we had gone to St. Bridget's in Lowertown, and then we came here, and this was a church I was familiar with from my teen years when my family had lived in Ottawa, and it just felt like the right place. So we were married here. Our three boys were baptized here, went through Sunday school and sacramental preparation and the sacraments. Jacob got married here. My father's funeral was here a couple of years ago. It just feels like all the major life events in my family are linked to this church.
Grandchildren baptized here.
Our grandchildren baptized here, that's right. And then in the course of being here, and particularly I think when Mike started working on the baptism ministry, we got to know other families who had kids the same age as ours.
Mm-hmm.
And then a social circle developed, and then we started just doing things as a group with one another. And that was just a lovely sense of community that came about through the church that has lasted for more than 35 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it used to include camping trips at Lac Philippe.
Wow.
There'd be about 6 to 8 families from St. Joe's with young children. And at least once a season we'd go camping together. We'd rent
The group site.
a group site, and it was phenomenal. I mean, the sense of community. Now, I can't give this interview without mentioning my hero at St. Joe's, Edna Montague.
Yes.
Now, it's not just because she was my cousin, but it's because she was a pioneer, lay leader in the church. And she lived every day out of the Vatican II vision of the church. The church is the people of God. And she worked hard at building community. And she led the baptism ministry, well, I guess sacraments of initiation, and roped us in when our kids were young.
Yes.
Oh, Edna's approach to baptism preparation was that you had to come for 6 weeks. And her idea was you were going to get to know a few other people who were at the same stage of the journey as you were. And boy, did we ever.
Yeah, it was building community, literally, amongst young families. And but Edna had a vision of Vatican II, and so did, fortunately, so did the Oblates that were here, Fred McGee and others. And it was a model for the church. In a sense, this church kept the vision of Vatican II alive, sometimes when the bishops weren't too focused on Vatican II. So the roots go deep here in terms of leadership, lay leadership, and a witness in the world.
Now, your family, Joanne, has had a long history at St. Joe's. And Michael, you've been like the genealogist.
Yes, I did Joanne's family's family tree. When Doug Roach was writing his memoir, he had reached out, and I said, well, I'll see what I can find on the Roaches. And we managed to get them back to Ireland. But
Let me just put on the record for people watching this video. Marion Cairns, who is my mother, has a video that is posted, and Doug Roach, her brother, my uncle, has a video that's posted. So that's the family link on why Doug was asking Mike to look for the family tree.
Right. So in the course of the research, we traced the Douglases back, and then connected through to the Douglases with the Douglases married the Roaches. So on the Douglas line, Archibald Douglas actually was an early Ottawa baker, and from Presbyterian background, an Anglican background. So it was a mixed marriage early on with an Anne Cunningham. And that couple, given the rocky relations between the churches in those years, in 1868, they were married at St. Joe's. They lived in the Cumberland area, but this was a mission of St. Joe's. So I guess St. Joe's served all of the Eastern Ontario, or
Yes.
quite a swath. And anyway, they're registered in St. Joe's as Anne Cunningham wedding to Archibald Douglas, 1868, which none of the family realized that they had roots that deep in this parish. So Joanne's grandparents were married in the parish.
Yeah, and when my granddaughter was baptized here, the priest who was presiding made a reference to the fact that she was, I don't remember how many generations of the family, 5 or 6,
Yeah.
that have been coming here.
I should mention too that I had studied at St. Paul, so was very familiar with the Oblates and knew a lot of the Oblates well. And we were married by Doug Crosby and have maintained good friendships with various Oblates. Unfortunately, a lot of my old professors are starting to get pretty old now and starting to lose them, but have great memories of the Oblates that taught at St. Paul's and were active in the city.
Good.
Let me just go back to Edna Montague. I recall Edna telling us a story one time that was about the beginning of the Women's Center, that she and Delia Carley had been having a conversation about the services that were available to men and the services that were not available to women who really needed them. And that conversation led to them looking into what the church could do, and look how that grew and evolved over the years.
Mhm.
And I was just floored by that, because not only was Edna somebody that we knew, but Delia Carley was a friend of my sister Karen's, who I had known since I was probably 17 or 18.
The Oblates were very big on Vatican II, and this church really gathered in that feeling of openness, and we had allowed women in to do all sorts of things that traditionally women didn't do, and including from doing what their homilies or the reflections, and being involved in all the preparation and things like that. So, and it went beyond that too.
And even before we started coming here, my sister Maureen had participated in liturgical planning here. And that was sort of in the days of Fred McGee, and then in the days of Jane Williams. And the liturgies, you never knew what was going to happen, because it was just very creative. And, there was dancing, there was music, there was, beautiful altar prep, and it was just highly, highly creative.
What I could recall a lot about the time when Jane Williams was here was that the music and the liturgy blended into one another
Yes.
beautifully.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
It was a very thoughtful approach to liturgy.
Very much so.
Yeah.
You should mention, Joanne, your great aunt that worked at St. Joe's here.
Oh, Marion spoke about
She
that
spoke
in her
about it.
video. Yeah,
The Daily, Marion Daily, I guess.
Aunt Marion,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
How long did she work here, do you recall?
When I was a teenager and we were living here, I don't think she was still doing it, but she would have been quite elderly by that point.
Okay.
But I think she had done it, my mom said, for 10 or 15 years. So the family was just rooted in the parish.
Good. Do you recall any significant events that occurred at St. Joe's during your tenure here?
Significant events, well, I think that the highlight, certainly during Edna Montague's time, I remember the Easter vigils were, they still are the focus of the church calendar, but when we got young children, we stopped coming to the late liturgies, because the kids would come early in the morning. But the Easter vigil celebrations here were memorable. It was a real celebration of the Easter faith, where you'd have a reception in the hall after, and it was bigger than Christmas. It was bigger than New Year's. It was a wonderful liturgical celebration of Easter, and that to me is one of my highlight memories of the parish.
I remember coming here in the 80s, and we for the Easter Vigil, and Conrad Rock would be up in the balcony.
Remember Conrad?
With that big cauldron and the big flame coming out.
Oh, yeah.
I kept thinking, I hope he has a fire extinguisher.
Yeah. The Easter fire.
Some of my most favorite memories are about things to do with children, and that was always my fear at the Christmas pageant, because they'd have all of these little votive lights along the steps, and all these little angels would be wandering by in these flowing robes and big wings. And I remember we literally one year sort of parked a parent up at the top of the stairs whose job was traffic control to make sure nobody had an unfortunate accident.
Yeah, the Christmas pageants were also a highlight. The kids were really engaged, and of course the church was full with relatives looking at the kids.
Oh, yes.
Let me tell you a story about that, because in thinking about my most vivid memories, this one came flashing back. There was one year where our eldest, Jacob, and he would have been about 6, had a role as a Roman soldier, and the narrative had the Roman soldier coming out and holding up the decree that was to tell everybody to go to Bethlehem. And it was a little pantomime. It was nothing particularly elaborate. But what hadn't occurred to me until the day of the pageant, so Christmas Eve at 5 o'clock, was that this little 6-year-old at the beginning of the pageant had to keep it together and come out and go through all of this with hundreds of eyes on him. And it was the first thing that happened in the pageant. And I thought, oh my, is he going to be able to carry this off? And he did just fine. Hundreds of people watching this little boy being a Roman soldier crossing the stage and holding up his decree while somebody else read the narrative.
One thing nice about children's liturgies here is that they continue to keep the children involved in the liturgy. Be it even by, walking up to the altar with their sticks, with the angels on them or whatever.
We missed them in COVID.
Yes. We still have them though.
Okay.
So one of the other things I'd like to share with the parishioners is a book, Michael, that you've just published. And it is referred to as Bytown 1847. Can you talk to us as to what prompted you to write the book?
Well, I had been doing some research in the archives around early Irish history in the Ottawa area, and I landed on these 1847 copies of the Bytown Packet, which was a surviving newspaper, which you're familiar with, I'm sure, and came across some accounts of 1847 when the Irish famine refugees were coming in, and Elizabeth Briere and the Oblates at the time were undertaking extraordinary actions to deal with this health crisis. And so I started collecting more material and went looking for more primary sources, and was able, fortunately, to research in the Sisters of Charity archives and also in various Oblate archives, because they had eyewitness accounts. Their letters were really, plus the newspapers, were the only eyewitness accounts of this amazing event, which is really unknown. And part of it really is, it's really part of the history of St. Joe's, because this predates the founding of the parish in the same geographical area. So in a way, this is part of our history, very much so as a parish, in this neighborhood of Lower Town. And so Elizabeth Briere, and as I mentioned, with the Oblates, and very much a real close partnership, really were exemplary and deserve our credit. They deserve credit, but deserve to be remembered, and their story should be told. And this marks the 175th anniversary of this event, so I thought it was a good time to get the story out.
Well, what some people do not remember or do not know is the first church at St. Joe's was a bilingual church, and it was French and English, and it served the Irish and French community of Bytown.
Right.
And it only became an Irish parish when the second church was built, and the French-speaking people could go to Sacré-Cœur.
Right.
So the sisters, the Grey Sisters, the French Order of the Grey Sisters, the Sœurs Gris, they were really involved with St. Joe's over the first 30, 40 years.
Right, that's a good point, Terry.
So when is your book going to be available, Michael, for the parishioners of St. Joe's to buy?
Well, it's actually available now, but with once COVID gets a little weaker, we're hoping to have some book signings at the back of the church on a Sunday or two at all the masses. So, in conversation with the parish, coming soon will be a book signing.
Super. Now, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with us?
I would mention that the recent consultation on the synod that St. Joe's has organized. I'd really encourage people, if they haven't participated, to get involved, to get engaged in the conversation about your vision for the church, your dreams, your disappointments, and to share that with the parish, because we're in an extraordinary time right now where the Pope Francis is asking the entire world to engage, because the future of the church is the laity, the people of God. So that's a kind of it come full circle. The synod, the spirit of the synod, which is really what the early '60s was about at St. Joe's, which is a very synodal model, where it's not top down, it's bottom up. The people of God through baptism is where everything starts. So that would be my last little message.
Thank you, Michael. Joanne, Michael, thank you very much for this informative interview. It was really enjoyable talking with you and sharing your experiences about St. Joe's. Thank you very much.
Thanks for
Thank you
doing
so
this,
much,
Jerry.
Ted.